Yesterday, I explained why oil briefly moved back above $100 a barrel. But buried inside that wider market story is one development that deserves much more attention. Saudi Arabia has increasingly relied on the Red Sea as an escape route from the disruption affecting the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that alternative route is itself under threat. And if the threat becomes a sustained disruption, the oil market could be facing a considerably larger problem than the price currently reflects. Welcome to the 2% Brief. Saudi Arabia would ordinarily export much of its oil through the Persian Gulf and then through the Strait of Hormuz. But with Hormuz facing severe disruption, Saudi Arabia has been moving more crude through its east-west pipeline. That pipeline crosses the country, carrying oil from the producing regions in the east to the Red Sea coast in the west. From there, tankers can leave without passing through Hormuz. Until now, that has provided Saudi Arabia with a crucial alternative. But the oil still has to travel through the Red Sea, and in many cases past the narrow Bab el-Mandeb Strait, before reaching the wider global market. That is where the situation has changed. The Houthis in Yemen have declared a maritime blockade against Saudi Arabia and threatened the shipping routes on which Saudi oil exports increasingly depend. There have also been renewed missile and drone attacks directed towards Saudi oil infrastructure in Jizan and Yanbi. That means the world's largest oil exporter is now facing risks on both sides of the country. Hormuz is threatened in the east. The Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb route are threatened in the west. But that does not mean Saudi oil exports have stopped. Tankers are still moving, and Brent crude pulled back below $100 after briefly crossing that level. But the strategic position is now more fragile than it was even a week ago. Yesterday's figures showed Brent ending the week at approximately $96.78 after briefly trading above $100. WTI finished around $89.31. Gold moved back above 4,000 while silver gained more than 4%. But the most important number may not be the daily oil price. It may be the amount of Saudi oil that can still be delivered reliably to the global market. Saudi Arabia does have further alternatives. Some oil can be redirected through Egypt's Suez Canal and the Sumed pipeline. Tankers can also take longer routes around Africa. But those alternatives are more expensive, slower, and constrained by available capacity. They cannot simply replace every barrel that would ordinarily travel through the Gulf or the southern Red Sea. And this creates three immediate risks. First, shipping and insurance costs rise even when the oil continues moving. Tankers operating near an active conflict zone may require additional protection, more expensive insurance, and in some cases longer routes. And those higher costs eventually feed into the delivered price of energy. Second, spare oil production capacity becomes less useful if the infrastructure required to deliver that oil is restricted. Saudi Arabia may still have oil available to produce, but available production is not the same thing as deliverable supply. The market ultimately needs barrels that can reach refiners and consumers. And third, the inflation consequences extend well beyond petrol and diesel prices. Oil affects transport, aviation, manufacturing, chemicals, food distribution, and many household costs. And that matters because the Federal Reserve begins its two-day meeting on Tuesday with its interest rate decision and Chairman Kevin Warsh's press conference on Wednesday. Now, before I talk about the Fed, if you find this sort of analysis useful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. The Fed is already dealing with inflation that remains above its target. It now has an additional energy threat and new tariffs that could both push costs higher. That makes the Fed's decision more difficult. Holding rates steady may look too relaxed if oil remains near or above $100. But raising rates would add further pressure to equities, borrowing costs, and an economy already showing signs of strain. This is why the threat to Saudi Arabia's Red Sea route matters well beyond the oil market. It could affect inflation, interest rates, corporate earnings, and the wider market outlook. So the next thing to watch is not simply whether Brent crosses $100 again. Watch whether tankers continue moving normally through the southern Red Sea. Watch shipping and insurance costs. Watch whether further attacks target Saudi oil infrastructure. And watch whether Saudi Arabia is forced to divert more exports through slower and more expensive alternatives. Because if both Hormuz and the Red Sea route remain under serious threat, $100 oil may not represent the conclusion of this story. It may only represent the point at which the market started paying attention. There is also a wider strategic question here. For years, energy markets have assumed that disruption in one route could be managed by switching flows elsewhere. Hormuz could be bypassed through the Red Sea. The Red Sea could be avoided by rerouting around Africa. Individual attacks could be absorbed through inflation, inventories, and spare capacity, but each alternative carries a cost, a delay, or a capacity limit. The danger is not necessarily one dramatic closure. It is the gradual loss of flexibility across the entire export system. Once that flexibility disappears, even a relatively small disruption can have a much larger effect on prices than markets expect. Now, for Inner Circle members, the full Sunday briefing will be published at 7 p.m. this evening and directed to their email accounts. I will examine the possible oil price scenarios, the pressure on Saudi export routes, what the Federal Reserve can realistically do, and the key levels to watch next in gold and silver. Now, you can join the free list or upgrade to the Inner Circle through the link in the description and pinned comment. But for the public market, the immediate question is simple. Can Saudi Arabia continue delivering oil reliably if the routes on both sides of the country remain under threat? Let me know what you think in the comments. Please, meanwhile, like the video, subscribe to the 2% Brief, and share this with someone following the oil market. And also look at my latest 2 videos, which are showing on screen now. I've noticed that my most recent videos are not being pushed by YouTube to a wider audience, and so any help you can give me in relation to this by sharing on social media and by hyping the videos would be very much appreciated. Thank you once again, and I look forward to reading your comments.